in the forgotten corridors of ancient history, long before the world's religions took their final shape, a darker narrative unfolded, one so disturbing that early scribes attempted to bury it beneath layers of doctrine and silence. This account begins with the Watchers, celestial beings described not merely as observers but as powerful entities who descended to earth with intentions far more complex than simple guardianship. In their earliest depictions, they were majestic, radiant, incomprehensible to human eyes yet. Something changed. It was as if their very presence disrupted the balance of creation, igniting a chain of events that would shape humanity's destiny. And in the banned version of their story, the one stripped from later scriptures, the Watchers did something far more devastating than fall. They reshaped the fate of the world before the flood. According to these ancient forbidden manuscripts, the Watchers did not descend out of divine duty, but rather out of fascination, curiosity, and rebellion. They observed humanity not as shepherds, but as beings capable of emotions, weakness, desire, and limitless potential. The texts say that what began as distant admiration slowly turned into obsession. The Watchers became enthralled not with humanity's beauty, but with its vulnerability. They saw in humans the ability to grow, adapt, and hunger for knowledge qualities that even the angels themselves lacked. And it was this fascination that drove them to break the most sacred boundary of the heavens, direct interference with human evil. What they did next would echo through every civilization that followed. Hidden fragments found in Ethiopia and the Judean desert reveal that the Watchers shared something far more dangerous than their present-day shared forbidden knowledge. Not just metalworking or astronomy, as later texts suggest, but advanced patterns of power, symbols of influence, and secrets capable of shifting the world's balance. They taught humanity how to manipulate creation, shape energies, and influence the forces that govern nature itself. These were not simple skills. They were fragments of celestial technology techniques only the divine was meant to wield. And once this knowledge entered human hands, corruption followed. Entire tribes rose with arrogance, believing themselves chosen by gods. Others vanished under the weight of abilities they could not control. But the banned version reveals an even deeper secret. The Watchers did not simply teach forbidden arts, they created leaders. These chosen individuals became vessels of celestial influence, blending ancient wisdom with human ambition. They were the first kings, the first warlords, the bringers of dominion. And with each generation corrupted by these teachings, the world drifted further from the harmony it once held. The Watchers did not merely fall in love with humans, they began to rule them, manipulating civilizations like pieces on a board. Under their guidance, humanity advanced too quickly, too unnaturally, awakening forces that were never meant to be disturbed. As these unnatural empires spread, the fabric of the earth itself began to strain. The banned manuscripts describe a world twisted by excess, cities that rose faster than nature could sustain, rituals that pulled energies from the sky, and hybrid beings whose existence violated both earthly and heavenly laws. These offspring, described as giants, titans, or Nephilim, were more than physical anomalies. They carried within them a distorted mixture of celestial power and human frailty. Their hunger grew insatiable, and ancient communities recorded entire regions ravaged by beings who consumed everything in their path. The Watchers, having unleashed this horror, could no longer contain what they had created. The more the Nephilim multiplied, the more chaos spread across the world. They warred against each other, tore down villages, and demanded sacrifices from the terrified human population. Humanity, once the innocent creation of divine breath, became trapped between tyrants from above and monsters born from forbidden unions. The banned scrolls say the Watchers tried desperately to hide their crimes, but the destruction was too vast. Their once majestic forms began to fade, warped by the very chaos they had caused. Their brilliance dimmed, their influence fractured, and the heavens themselves reacted with judgment. Nature began turning against them. Storms intensified, seasons shifted, and the sky darkened with omens of a coming end, in the dim glow of a world collapsing under its own weight. The Watchers moved across the ancient landscape with a silence that concealed their true intent. Humanity believed they were beings of light, heavenly guardians descending with messages of wisdom, Buddha. The truth buried in forbidden manuscripts paints a far darker portrait. These celestial beings began teaching humans metallurgy, sorcery, enchantments, and weapons beyond their time. Entire tribes stood in awe, as knowledge meant only for the celestial realm was handed to mortals who are never meant to wield it. This transfer of power fractured the boundary between earth and the divine, creating a technological and spiritual imbalance that accelerated the corruption of the world long before the floodwaters ever touched the soil. And in those final days, as secrets spread like wildfire, the Watchers watched their influence reshape the destiny of humanity in ways even heaven feared. But their interference didn't stop at forbidden knowledge. Ancient banned versions of the story describe how the Watchers sought something deeper, something dangerously human. They descended not just to teach, but to experience desire, emotion, and the pull of earthly life. Drawn to mortal women, they crossed the boundary no angelic being was ever meant to cross. Their unions produced children who were neither mortal nor divine, born with impossible strength and violent appetites. These beings, known across ancient civilizations by many names, destabilized the natural order. Cities that were once peaceful became battlegrounds. Entire regions reported tremors, storms, and unnatural events tied to the presence of these hybrid creatures. As humanity looked up to the Watchers for guidance, the beings meant to protect them were reshaping the world into a reflection of their own corrupted desires, leaving heaven with no choice but to intervene. As the Watchers' influence spread, humanity entered its darkest age. According to the suppressed texts, these beings began establishing dominions, shadow kingdoms hidden within mountains, deserts, and vast forests where they reigned as gods. They demanded offerings, instructed rituals, and shaped early belief systems to reflect their own power. Some tribes worshipped them as creators, others feared them as devourers. Their hybrid offspring rampaged across these territories, consuming resources and reshaping the environment. Reports from early civilizations describe colossal beings draining rivers, uprooting forests, and altering landscapes in acts of dominance. Heaven watched as the earth once balanced spiraled toward destruction. The Watchers, intoxicated by the taste of power, no longer resembled the guardians they had once been, and with every passing generation, the cries of the earth grew louder, demanding justice for the chaos unleashed. In the fading twilight of antediluvian earth, a silence thicker than stone settled over the forgotten cities where the Watchers once walked, leaving behind shadows that clung to broken altars and shattered These beings, neither fully divine nor bound by mortal flesh, moved through the world with a purpose that no scripture was ever meant to reveal openly. Their descent wasn't a moment of rebellion, but a calculated intervention, driven by an obsession with reshaping humanity into something far beyond what the Creator intended. As the first stars emerged, the Watchers carved symbols into the bedrock of mountains, inscriptions that trembled with forbidden knowledge, hidden beneath layers of dust and fear. These markings whispered of an agenda far more complex than the Zaran intention to accelerate human evolution, to grant us weapons of understanding so powerful that even heaven trembled at the consequences. From the depths of their luminous descent, they approached humanity not as corruptors, but as architects, gift-givers, whose lessons twisted into curses only after mankind's hands proved too fragile for celestial fire. They taught the craft of forging metals that could slice through stone as easily as light cuts through darkness. They revealed the secrets of astronomical cycles, allowing ancient tribes to predict eclipses, floods, and cosmic shifts with a precision that later civilizations would attribute to divine miracles. But their most dangerous gift was not a weapon or a tool, rather. It was the ability to see the hidden mechanics of creation, a knowledge that shattered the boundary between the mortal and the eternal. As humans absorbed these teachings, the world shifted from innocence to ambition, and the heavens watched in dread as the first sparks of forbidden power ignited in human hearts. Yet, even as their influence spread across continents, the Watchers discovered that their teachings carried a cost they had never calculated. Humanity, once guided by instinct and wonder, began experimenting with forces its spirit wasn't built to withstand. Rituals that drew on celestial energy with reckless hunger. Rituals that bent the fabric of nature in ways no mortal was meant to command. The Watchers, torn between pride and fear, attempted to guide humanity back from the brink. But the momentum of forbidden knowledge had already taken root. The world grew louder, brighter, more chaotic, and heaven saw that the earth was not simply drifting toward destruction. It was accelerating toward a transformation so profound that even the angels no longer recognized the creation they once guarded.